Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about one of the most unusual stories to come out of Russia this year, because this one doesn't involve oil prices, sanctions, interest rates, or military spending. Instead, it involves a glamorous celebrity, a social media influencer, and a message that appears to have rattled the Kremlin enough for them to issue a public response. Now, if I'd said to you a few years ago that one of the biggest warnings to Vladimir Putin in 2026 would come not from an opposition politician, not from a business leader, not from a governor, but from an Instagram celebrity living a luxury lifestyle abroad, you probably wouldn't have believed me. But that's exactly where we are today, because Victoria Bonya, one of Russia's best-known media personalities and influencers, has posted a video online which has reportedly been viewed more than 20 million times and received more than 1 million likes. And in that video, she issued a stark warning that ordinary Russians are being squeezed too hard, that officials are hiding the truth, and that if pressure continues, there could eventually be a public backlash. So in today's video, I want to run through exactly who Victoria Bonya is, why this matters, what she said, why the Kremlin felt the need to respond, and what this may tell us about the real state of Russia's economy and society right now. But before we get into all of the detail on that, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscriber button? And if you find today's video useful and thought-provoking, then please also give me a thumbs up. So let's start with the basics. Who is Victoria Bonya? Well, Bonya is not a politician. She's not an economist. She's not a military analyst. She became famous originally through Russian reality TV, particularly a hugely popular show called Dom 2, which is one of the biggest entertainment programs in Russia for many years. If you think of it like a mixture between Big Brother, Love Island and reality drama all rolled into one. From there, she built a large celebrity profile, moved into presenting, modelling, endorsements, luxury lifestyle content and social media. Over time, she became one of those recognisable public figures whose fame moves beyond television and into mainstream celebrity culture. And importantly, she's built a massive online following. She's currently got over 13 million Instagram followers, which is a huge audience by anybody's standards. And why is this significant? Because when somebody with that sort of reach says something political, millions of ordinary people hear it instantly. This isn't a niche opposition channel. This isn't a specialist politician commentator. This is mainstream celebrity culture crossing over into public criticism. And that's where this story becomes interesting. Victoria Bonya recently posted an 18-minute video on Instagram in which she spoke directly about life inside Russia and the pressures facing ordinary people. She said the public are being squeezed too hard and that fear exists all across society. She went on to say that people are scared, bloggers are scared, artists are scared, officials are scared, and she suggested that many people around Vladimir Putin are not telling the truth about what is really happening. Now that line is particularly important because throughout history, one of the biggest dangers for any centralised political system is when leaders become insulated, when bad news is filtered out and only positive reports move upwards, when ministers and officials become more interested in protecting themselves rather than reporting reality. And Victoria Bonya was effectively saying that Vladimir Putin may not be hearing the truth from the people around him. Whether that's accurate or not, it's an extraordinary thing for a celebrity with millions of followers in Russia to say publicly. But she went on further. She warned that if ordinary Russians continue to be squeezed economically and socially, then one day people could erupt. Now that is an explosive headline from all of this, because what she's talking about is frustration reaching boiling point in Russia. Now let's be clear here, she wasn't calling for revolution, she did not call for protests and didn't make a dramatic political demand. What she said was arguably more powerful. She articulated the feeling that many people have already said in private in Russia, that life is becoming harder, patience is wearing thin, and there are limits to how much pressure people can absorb. Now, what exactly does squeeze too hard mean in practical terms? Well, let's talk about the economics. Russia has officially continued growing due to wartime spending, industrial production linked to defence, and large state expenditure. We've talked about that a lot on the channel, the movement to the wartime economy. So on paper, parts of the economy look resilient. But beneath the headline numbers, there are some serious pressures. Inflation remains a major issue. Food prices have risen sharply in many categories. Labour shortages have driven up wage costs in many sectors, but many households still feel poorer in real terms. Interest rates have been kept very high to try to contain inflation, and mortgage affordability has worsened. Consumer credit has become more expensive. At the same time, tax rises, utility increases, and public services strain all hit households. So while some sectors linked to the war economy may be booming, many ordinary citizens are feeling the squeeze. And that's before we get onto the social side. There are tighter controls over speech, more caution over what people say online, restrictions in the media, pressure on independent voices, and when people feel economic stress at the same time as reduced freedom, frustration tends to build. Victoria Bonya also referenced regional problems such as flooding, agricultural difficulties, and internet disruptions. And again, that's significant because one of the weaknesses of a large centralised state is that regional grievances can simmer for a long time before suddenly becoming visible. Now, perhaps the most fascinating part of this entire story is what happened next. The Kremlin actually responded. And if you just think about that for a moment, there are thousands of people posting online every day. I should know, I'm one of them. Millions of commentators, endless criticism, rumours and noise. Yet officials felt it's necessary to publicly acknowledge Victoria Bonya's comments and say that they were aware of the issues being raised. Now that tells us two things. Firstly, the video clearly gained serious traction in Russia. And secondly, the themes she raised have struck a nerve because they resonate more widely than the Kremlin would like. Now, we should also be balanced here. There are two ways to interpret Victoria Bonya's intervention. The first is that she's genuinely concerned. She has a large platform, perhaps feels safer speaking because she spends most of her time outside of Russia, and wanted to warn that the mood on the ground is worsening. That is entirely feasible. The second interpretation is a bit more cynical. Some will argue that criticism of lower-level officials while sparing the leader is a common political safety valve. In other words, allow frustration to be directed at bureaucrats, governors and ministers while preserving the image of the president as someone who simply hasn't been told the truth. That model has existed in many countries throughout history. So viewers, you can make up your own minds on this one, but personally, I think whichever explanation you choose, the more important issue is this. When entertainers and lifestyle influencers begin talking openly about inflation, fear and public anger, it usually means that those concerns have moved beyond politics and into mainstream society. That is when governments need to pay attention, because economists can warn about inflation, analysts can warn about deficits, bankers can warn about interest rates. But when celebrity culture starts warning about living standards, it suggests the issue has become part of everyday conversations, and that is much more difficult to contain. Now, does this mean that Russia is on the verge of unrest? No, we should avoid sensationalism here. Large countries can absorb frustration for long periods. People adapt, governments adjust, support can remain stronger than outsiders assume, and predicting sudden political change is usually a losing game. However, it does suggest that pressure in Russia is building. And one of the recurring themes we've discussed on this channel is that the economic strain often appears very slowly and then all of a sudden very quickly. At first, it's complaints, then fatigue, then cynicism, then disengagement, then anger. So the real question here is not whether Victoria Bonya changes anything personally. She probably doesn't. The real question is whether her message reflects a broader private mood already spreading across Russian society. If it does, then this video may be remembered as a signal rather than an event. A signal that patience is being tested, a signal that inflation and pressure matter more than propaganda, and a signal that even glamour influencers can sometimes say what others are thinking. So overall, a fascinating story here, a highly unusual development, and one that I thought was worth watching closely, and we'll keep an eye on it going forward. Because if the Kremlin is responding to Instagram celebrities, it may suggest that the message has landed with them. So I'll keep you posted on any further news on this story and anything else that I think is interesting coming out of Russia. But hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. That's what I'm trying to do. Look at different angles and give you ideas that maybe get you thinking in different ways. If you've liked what I've said today, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so